Welcome to Live from Dennis's House. Today we're going to be speaking to Johnny Ray Miller, the author of When We're Singing, a new book about the Partridge Family, and it puts special emphasis on their music. So it was a great book, and we're going to talk to him. We're going to find out all there is to know about the Partridge Family, how they recorded the songs, and a million other things. On the phone with us now is Johnny Ray Miller, the author of the book When We're Singing, about the Partridge Family and their music. So welcome, John. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Because I really like the way that you did this, too, about where you went from the aspect of the music. And
thank you.
Yeah, so now, were you a big fan as a child of the Partridge Family, or what?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's rooted in my childhood for sure.
Yeah.
I was originally from Canton, Ohio, and I was, the perfect age for the television show when it came on. And I just used to watch it at home with my parents, but it was always the music that just always pulled me into it. I was always, interested in the arts, even from a young age. So I kind of think that I always instinctively knew that it was really good music, even though I was into the show and, all of the things that came along with it. It was the music I was so fascinated with. And, I finally talked my mother into taking me to the store, and it was pretty much my first record album that I ever got was a Partridge Family album. And, she joked with me how it would be a phase. I'm sure she's...
Here we are 45 years later, right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
I want to talk about, the music now. That, like you said, you have that first album that came out, and they had the best musicians at the time. Of course, the Wrecking Crew was the greatest studio musicians in the world, and, in L.A., they played on basically everybody's albums. And
right.
So
yeah, and that's kind of, it's funny how it worked out as I put the book together, because the first person that I had an exchange with was David Cassidy, and then in order to go forward, I felt I really wanted and needed Shirley Jones, so I went after her, and we did the interview together. And of course, at that point, she opened the doors for me to talk to a lot of other people. But on the flip side, the funny thing is Shirley was not in the studio a lot, in the recording studio. She would go in and she would do separate tracks of her own at a separate time, and she wasn't in there when the musicians were in there, so she didn't really know the musicians. David, though, he was in there, and he was very, he participated with the musicians, and he was very eager to learn from what everyone told me, and took it very seriously and wanted the music to be really good. He wanted credible music. And so they were all on the same page together. And a guy that I know back here, when I started digging into the music, there was a connection to Denny Tedesco, who made the film The Wrecking Crew. So
okay.
He hooked me up with Denny, and then Denny put me in touch with Hal Blaine, who, is the drummer, the greatest drummer of that era.
Right.
He's the guy who coined the phrase The Wrecking Crew. And Hal Blaine was my first interview of the musicians. And he just had such fond memories of the Partridge Family. The Partridge Family wasn't just yet another band for him. He remembered it really vividly, and he remembered the things that made it unique and special. And he remembers taking the cast to the parade in one of his cars one year. And he basically opened up his little black book and gave me a whole bunch of phone numbers, and then I started talking to all the musicians, and it was just cool to hear them all talk about the Partridge Family and all of the thinking that went behind those arrangements.
And it became such a huge smash. It was, unbelievable. I don't think anyone could have predicted that. And David Cassidy.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And they put a big campaign behind it. Bell Records at the time was really known as a singles label. And Larry Utah was the president of the label. And timing has a lot to do with how this worked out.
Right.
It was just one of those things where Bell Records was really focused on trying to build their reputation with albums and artists on albums rather than singles. And up to that point, they had been, really successful at singles. So here comes the Partridge Family, and they put a big campaign behind it to launch it, and it was really focused on the album sales. In fact, Wes Farrell even talks in the book about certain singles that he thinks he could have had hits with, but they held them back because they didn't want to affect the album sales. So that was a new thinking for Bell Records, and it really worked. They had to work hard to get that first album out of the gate, though. Once the first album got out of the gate, though, and it started to climb the charts, then the rest of the albums, people were just waiting for them to come out. They would be, they'd be climbing the top 40 the day that they were released.
Right. And it was kind of genius how the cross-marketing worked, too. The show would sell the albums would sell the show, and then David Cassidy started going on tour.
Yeah. And, it's almost like there's a catch-22 to all of that, too. The albums definitely perpetuated the show. The show didn't get picked up right away for even the second half of its first season. It got picked up about halfway through and renewed for its remainder of its first season. But by that time, I Think I Love You had hit at number one, and the Partridge Family album was selling in the millions. So the music certainly influenced it getting renewed. But at the same time, there would have been no music had there never been a show. So you have that going on, and then David Cassidy breaks out as a solo artist, and certainly, is a strong vocalist and a legitimate musician.
Absolutely.
And his career, is launching, and the next thing you know, he's kind of got to deal with this marketing image that's attached to it all. It's like the very thing that made him was also the thing that he had to try to figure out how to manage and control in order to break free of it. Like, the gist of my book, though, is that we look back now and everybody understands what went on then and can look at it and analyze it and appreciate the image for the image of what it, for what it was, and separate that from the fact that it was really good music. The music was just really strong, good pop contemporary music underneath the veil of this marketing image that they created. And that isn't always the case. They often market bands for television, and they do it so well that nobody pays attention, to how bad the band may be. But in this case, they were very good.
Yeah.
That's because of David Cassidy and Tony Romeo, the songwriter. All those songwriters were just top-notch songwriters. Mike Melvoin doing those arrangements and John Baylor, doing the vocal arrangements. It was just pure chemistry.
I love how you do that in the book, too, that you go through every album and every song. And, it's just, there's a ton of work, in this book.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Well, it's only work if it's work. It was a lot of
So
it was just really a lot of fun.
Yeah, let me ask you about the research that you did and the interviews. You started touching on it. So Shirley Jones is the first one you spoke to. How'd you get in touch with her?
Well, I was working at this theater, and we had just done the David Cassidy concert, and I had spoke to her management at one point about considering bringing her in for a concert. And I just reached back out to her management, and who at the time it was her now late husband, Marty Ingalls. Mm-hmm. And he spoke with me a couple of times, and he had remembered me from, working out a deal to bring her into the theater. That never came to be because I left the position. But so shortly after that, I would say 3 weeks after that, talking to him for, I don't know, a couple of minutes over the course of a couple of weeks, I got a phone call out of the blue, and I wasn't expecting it. It's kind of funny because I remember it so vividly because I was standing at a grocery checkout line, and this was before caller ID or any of this stuff, I had my little flip-top phone, and I just stood up and answered it, and I hear this voice say, "Hi, John, it's Shirley Jones." I'm trying to keep my composure, and I just literally drop my groceries and walk outside, and I never even went back in to get them. So I went out on the sidewalk and I talked to her for a few minutes, and she was actually thrilled that somebody was doing this, and she invited me to sit with her, and said several times, we spoke probably 2.5 hours, and said several times that this is really important, this needs to get done. And, she had asked me if I talked to David, and she said she'd do anything to support it. And so she was just terrific. And so after that, I would begin talking to other people, and because she spoke to me, I'm sure that played a big role in other people speaking to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw just recently that Danny has been promoting the book as well. I saw some pictures with him promoting it.
Yeah, that was so exciting to see that. Danny, I interviewed, probably a third of the way through the process. And the cool thing about that interview was that he had just been on stage with David Cassidy like 2 nights before I talked to him. And he was really pumped up about it because there had been a bet. He did this concert with David Cassidy, and he made a bet with David that he could learn how to play the bass. And so he spent all these months learning how to play Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted on the bass. And so he comes out, and, David, they planned the whole thing, and David knew he was coming out. But what David and nobody else knew was that Danny came out on stage dressed in red crushed velvet. So
awesome.
when he came out, and he was not only dressed in red crushed velvet, but it looked like it was Shirley's outfit. So, David was barely keep a straight face, and they were poking at each other in fun, and they sang Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted. So when I talked to Danny, it was like 2 days later, and he was just on a super high from that, and he was just so much fun. He was just, this down-to-earth guy that is exactly, how everybody envisions him to be. Just he was unguarded and excited about the Partridge Family, and excited in a way that was like appreciative. He definitely expressed his deep appreciation for having been on that show, and just gave it so much credit for, lifting up his career to what it is today. And here we are, and, I turn on my computer one day and I see, that he sent a tweet out about the book. It was, I was so incredibly touched by that, I can't even tell you. It was so exciting to see that.
Yeah, it was great. And then I love, too, that in the middle here you have a bunch of pictures, never before seen by me anyway. And, some of them you got from their private collections and everything. Tell us where you got all these pictures.
Yeah, the photo section's an interesting story because a lot of the fans that have been fans from the very beginning are big collectors. And so there were a lot of people who really wanted to see the most definitive collection of memorabilia and photos that could be put together. The photo section, it was almost as hard as writing the book.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Searching out all the photos. One fan in Australia, who I think probably has the biggest collection in the world, donated, I don't want to say half of them, but maybe a third of the photos that are in that book of the memorabilia, just stuff that nobody's ever seen before. And David's personal photographer, Henry Diltz, God bless that man, got on board, and he just supported the campaign, and he sent me photos of David and the Partridge Family that he had to use, just to see this happen. So, and then Suzanne Crowe, who tragically died a couple years ago out of nowhere, she also had photos that we put in the book that were her personal, never-before-seen photos. Right. And so, the photo section is kind of amazing how that all came together, but really that came together because of the working together between the fans and the cast and the people who just wanted to see it happen.
Yeah, and that's great. It makes the book that much better. It's like you get halfway through the book and you find this awesome surprise in the middle with all these great pictures, and it's like...
thank you. That's really nice to hear.
And all these memorabilia, I've never seen most of these things, but it looks like it's the Holy Grail, the Partridge Family record cabinet. You said it's the most rarest of all.
Yeah. I do think that's probably considered the holy grail of the memorabilia. There's never been too many of those appear out there. The interesting thing about the memorabilia and the merchandise, that was another category of, dismay for David Cassidy because he didn't really make anything on any of that, yet they were allowed to use his image. And the others too. I don't think that they really made but pennies on it either. But really, David, they definitely cashed in on his image. And so, he wanted the stuff to be good, and he's talked about it many times in his autobiography, that he's all about fun things for the fans, but he wanted it to be quality, and it was cheaply made, you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing to me about the memorabilia of the Partridge Family, is that I really believe that it was the first big explosion of marketing items and memorabilia around the TV show. I don't think it had ever been that big until the Partridge Family.
I want to talk about the bus now, because you talked about that in the book, and that and it's like nobody knows where the actual bus is.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the bus definitely has its own little following, not even just by Partridge Family people, but by vehicle lovers and lovers of TV automobiles and famous TV vehicles. And that was another deal where I just happened to connect with this guy who had worked out in L.A. restoring old automobiles from the sets on Hollywood. He was a professional restoration guy, and he had done some restaurants, and he was just really, really into finding the Partridge Family bus, and still is. And so I just started a dialogue with him, and pretty soon it became my mission too. And I started digging into all of these facts that have been printed about the bus, only to discover that it's been wrong. They have documented incorrectly information about the Partridge Family bus since the beginning of time. It's so interesting, because if you get on Wikipedia, they have it documented and sourced I think it's sourced to the Joey Green book on the Partridge Family that was an episode guide that came out in the 90s, which was a fun factoid it was a different kind of book, this kind of books that they did then, that they were just more fun, and it was sort of pre-internet. So it would have been very difficult probably to get to the bottom of the truth before the internet days. But it's wrong. They claim that it's from a certain year. They claim that it was a 57, and it's not a 57. Turns out to be a 1955, and it's made in very limited quantities. That same exact year that they produced it was the only year where they did this 4-month thing where they switched their model for just 4 months out of the year, and then it was during those 4 months that the Partridge Family bus was actually made. So not only is the Partridge Family bus a big mystery and so elusive to find, but the actual bus, even before the paint job, is difficult to find.
Right.
So it's super rare, and there's been stories upon stories about, we saw the bus, and somebody claims they have the bus, and there's the story that the bus sat at Lucy's Tacos in L.A. for years and years.
I had heard
that.
But
it just it's not the case. And once you learn, when you take a good hard look at the Partridge Family bus, all you got to do is just freeze one of the stills of your DVD, and you look at some of these other pictures, it's not the Partridge Family bus. So, it's out there somewhere.
The fact that the thing that I liked about that you mentioned that I didn't know either, that it's the link to Charles Manson, that the bus was actually used for the movie Helter Skelter.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the last known sighting of the use of the Partridge Family bus on television or in the movies.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. So hopefully someday, we'll find that. That'll be a great documentary in search of the Partridge Family bus.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. The guy Colin, who worked with me so hard on unraveling some of this, that's his goal. He wants to make a documentary about the bus someday. So he's out there every single day searching for parts and pieces, and not a day goes by does he give up on it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to the music now. What is your favorite Partridge Family song of all time?
You know what? My favorite Partridge Family song is "My Christmas Card to You" from the Christmas album.
Oh, okay.
I love that song so much, and it's one of those ones. It's the only original song that was written for the Partridge Family's Christmas album, and it was written by Tony Romeo, who was the premier Partridge Family songwriter. I mean, if you were going to pick one songwriter that you would tie really closely to the Partridge Family, it would be Tony Romeo. Yeah, Tony Romeo and Wes Farrell, weirdly enough, they died within like 6 months of each other. And it was in the mid-'90s. It was not long after Ken Sharp had interviewed both of them. So kind of bizarre how all that happened.
Mm. Yeah, and as you mentioned,
and what a loss.
As you mentioned, that Suzanne Crowe died, surprisingly, one of the youngest members.
Yeah, that was another incredibly tragic moment. She had kind of become a friend to me, that we could talk on the phone, and it was just really shocking to see that happen. And it happened 3 days. Oddly enough, it happened like 3 days before I launched the Kickstarter campaign to fund the book. Mm-hmm. So it was just it just floored me. It was just so devastating to see that happen. And here I was, hours away from launching this campaign, and she knew what was going on. She was on board with the campaign, and just so shocking. Really. Yeah.
It's very sad. And Dave Madden, we lost too. A lot of these people in the book no longer with us.
Yeah, I know. And Dave Madden, man, he was just so much fun. He was so funny, and he just talked to you like he knew you his whole life. And I think you saw in there, I kept that interview pretty much intact.
Yeah, I did see that, yes. And
just because it just captured the spirit of him so much. In fact, I remember when I was talking to Brian Forster, who played the little drummer at one point, after Dave passed away, I said, hey, Brian, Dave made a lot of jokes about death and this and that. I said, do you think it's, I should take it out? And he just kind of laughed and said, oh, no way. He goes, that's Dave, So you can hear Dave's spirit and his joking all through that interview. And, it's just kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, and that was, for me, besides the music, that his interaction with Danny was, priceless.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in fact, that's basically what sold the pilot, was Danny, and that interaction he had with Dave Madden. And the second they sold the pilot on that, then the executives wanted more and more and more of that. And so pretty soon all the shows are, really focused on Danny. Then when David became a breakout star, by the second season, you see there's a shift. And the story writing, David gets a little bit more stories, and there's a little bit more growth between his character and Danny, and the tensions there, and the character of Keith and Susan Day start to develop a little bit more.
Yeah, and I like how you put in the book, too, about how they all started getting a little jealous who was getting the storylines in the beginning, and Shirley sat him down and said, hey, this is not going to work. You all better behave yourself.
Yeah, that is a great story. That story comes from Shirley, and she's told it many, many times. And I just love it because, well, the thing I love about that story is that they really liked each other, and they all got along well, and they respected Shirley, all of them, a great deal. The things that Suzanne Crowe and Brian Forster said about Shirley, and everyone had this great respect for her. So I love that story because it's sort of like, she was able to sit them down and teach them, here's what we got to do to stick together, and, you can't control other people. So they all made their own choice, and they made the choice that we're going to stick together. And I really believe that choice, even as kids and teenagers, Shirley led that little meeting, but they made that choice. And Bob Claver, the executive producer, talked many times about, how that show had no tension, that everybody got along so well. And so I love that story. It's sometimes people take it out of context, and it bugs me because it's a story about bringing people together and how they made the choice to stick together, not fall apart.
Right. Yeah. So, this is, I have to congratulate you on this book. It's an excellent book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, where can people get this? At all the usual spots, or?
No, actually, we're in the very early phases of getting it out there. Really, it released in late December, and we were overwhelmed getting the first batch of books out of here. And so now I'm only just right now breaking out into a full-blown marketing campaign.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been going out doing book signings, and people are getting their books now, and so I've got people just starting to react to them, the cast, and it's been very positive. But primarily right now, you can get it through my website exclusively at whenwe'resinging.com. We're just starting to get into some small retail stores down in Pittsburgh at Bradley's Book Outlet. There's several down in the Pittsburgh area, 5 or 6 of them, and it's available there. And also available at a place called Music to My Ear, which is an audio store, a really high-end boutique audio store that sells records and audio equipment, and they're carrying a limited supply of the books. And I'm out there with them, doing the book signings and making them available every which way I can. But haven't gone towards Amazon yet or anything like that. We're going to take the next several months and just keep pushing it through the website for a while.
All right, great stuff. Yeah, so When We're Singing by Johnny Ray Miller, and that you can get it on whenwe'resinging.com, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So anyone who ever watched The Partridge Family or listened to David's music, there's millions and millions of you out there. You should definitely go out and buy this book just for the pictures alone. If you don't like to read, just get the pictures. It's worth it just for that alone. So, yeah, you did an excellent job, and it shows in the book. This is a great book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we'll be following you and see what's going on with this, and we'll be following that bus too. Let me know if you find that bus. I want to be there when it gets uncovered.
Okay, deal. We'll go for a ride in it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm ready.
All right, Johnny. Take care. It was great talking to you. Great job.
Hey, thank you so much, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, welcome back live from Dennis's house. That was our interview with Johnny Ray Miller, the author of When We're Singing, a book about the Partridge Family and specializing with their music. So we learned a lot during that interview. It's a great book. He was a great guy. Great talking to him. We learned all about their music, all about the cast, the crew, the musicians, the songwriters, everything you'd ever want to know is in this book. Especially about the bus. You can't find that bus. Who knew what happened to the bus? So we're going to be watching that. So go out and buy When We're Singing. Go to whenwe'resinging.com and you can pick up this book. You can't believe, if you have any interest in the Partridge Family or the 70s, this stuff will bring back so many memories. There's so many pictures. And it's just a lot of fun. Great book. So go out and check that out. And now we're going to wrap up this show, and we're going to go out with some songs. How about Pleasant Valley Sunday by the Monkees and Echo Valley 26809 by the Partridge Family. And we'll see you next time on Live from Dennis's House. 474 The Mix.